And being Omega men, we can't just allow ourselves to succumb and to be weakened by that which can plague the outer society. We've got to keep our standards high because that's who we are. We can't submit to that. We can't commit to anything less. We have to be on our guard, be at our place, and be at our best, because when the world calls, Omega men answer. The world is calling for Omega right now. We Omega men can't afford to be divided. Doesn't matter what chapter took you over. Doesn't matter what district you went over in. Doesn't matter what office you hold, what office you want to hold. Doesn't matter whether you're an undergraduate brother or a graduate brother. Doesn't matter who gets the credit for the great idea. Doesn't matter who gets to sing the solo on the hymn. Some things just don't matter.
All right.
Omega can't afford to be divided. Omega men can't answer the world's call if we're divided. We'll be in turmoil just like the world. We'll be in a state of confusion just like the world. We'll be in disarray just like the world. We've got to be better than that, my fellow Omega brothers. When the world calls, we got to be ready. Because Omega men answer. When we are at our fullest potential, nothing can stop us. It's when we're not together that we get in our own way and stop ourselves. It's when we're not together that we fail and we falter, that we stumble and stammer, that we weaken and grow weary. If a house be divided against itself, Jesus said in Mark 3rd chapter 25th verse, that house cannot stand. Jesus said that in biblical terms. Abraham Lincoln adapted these words to one of his own speeches in 1858 when he said in governmental terms, and I quote, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free." Close quote. History tells us that Lincoln was right, because we had a civil war and it changed this nation forever. We know Jesus was right. Faith tells us that, because this parable lives on to guide us in our daily walk of life. But regardless of whether it's in spiritual terms or governmental terms, whether or not it's spoken to address a philosophy of life or a philosophy of statesmanship, no matter if it's mentioned in biblical times or slavery times or current times, those words ring forever true. If a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And Omega Psi Phi is not going to be exempt to something that is that global in its application. A house divided against itself cannot stand. As a world watches and wonders about the terrorism that we saw, that horrified us in London and Paris and Barcelona and Las Vegas and even more recently in New York, there's concern about a world divided. As people watch and wonder about the racial demonstrations that we witnessed in Charlottesville and St. Louis and Richmond and Charlotte and in places all across this country, there's concern about a people divided. And as a nation watches and wonders about the disagreements in Washington with the president and the Congress and the federal court system, there's concern about a nation divided. And as a fraternity, empowered and emboldened to embark to embrace our own unique position in society, as we emblaze and emboss our stamp on this great society, if we don't fulfill our destiny, my brothers, we'll watch and we'll wonder as we see communities divided. We see neighborhoods divided. We see blocks divided. We see families divided. We see schoolmates divided. We see roommates divided. We see church folk divided. We see Panhellenic folk divided. We see law enforcement folk divided. We see everybody divided. If we don't come forward When the world calls, if Omega men don't answer, then everything will go to destruction. We've got to come together, we've got to pray together, we've got to stay together. And if we model that, if we stay together, my brothers, and not get divided ourselves, then we begin to be that kind of resource that the communities around us can look to for a source of hope, for a source of understanding, for a source of the ability to move through the most difficult times that we're going through. When the world calls, Omega men answer. As I campaigned across our great state of North Carolina during last year's election cycle, I went to every pocket of the Tar Heel State. I went to the coastal plains, I went to the Piedmont, I went to the mountains. I went over to the Outer Banks, I went down to the Crystal Coast, to the Sand Hills, I came around down east, I went to the Triad, and of course right there in the Triangle. I went to Waynesville in the far west. I went to Wilmington down on the coast. I went up in the northwest to New Lund, and in the southeast down to New Bern. I went to Salisbury. I went to Gumberry. I went to every little place that'll make you think of Mayberry. And yet, I noticed whether it was some place that had a mountain mentality or whether they had a coastal consciousness, everybody was the same. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing out of life. Everybody wants fairness. Everybody wants equality. Everybody wants justice. Everybody wants consistency. Nobody wants to go back. Everybody wants to go forward. And yet, while I also found that there was more that united us than divided us, there's some this day and time that prefer to divide us. Because they find that if they divide us, then it strengthens whatever agenda they might have. But just remember, as we look around this room and see the wonder of diversity emblematic in this place. Doesn't matter what age you are. Doesn't matter what gender you are. Doesn't matter what your skin color is, what race you are. Doesn't care what religion you are. Doesn't matter what your social status is, what your economic status is. Doesn't matter your educational status. Doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you live in. We're all the same. And we ought not let artificial barriers determine who we are. We define ourselves. And when we define ourselves, we find the commonality in our bonds. And that's why I challenge my brothers to remember that in this chaotic climate which bewilders this world and in this exhausting atmosphere which confuses this world, this is Omega's moment in time. We have a dearth of leadership right now. Who are our leaders? They need to be Omega men. But we've got to make sure, along with our Pan-Hellenic partners, that we understand that there's strength in numbers and understand as well that as far as Omega's concerned, Omega's got to have its own house in order to make sure that when the world calls, we answer. So as a result, my brothers, it's time for all hands on deck. It's time to answer the call to duty. Bring back that absent brother. Put your GPS on that lost brother. Unearth that underground brother. Deprogram and reprogram that decked out in paraphernalia but never come to a meeting brother.
Say that again.
Channel the energy of that atomic dog listening, tongue wagging, high stepping brother. He's got energy. He's got enthusiasm. But we got to direct it in the right place. We need all the brothers that are in the shadows to come into the light. We need all the brothers that are under the radar to come out where they can be seen. We got to keep brothers from ducking and dodging and having to come back so they can give back. The world is calling, my brothers, Omega men, must answer. This is no time to slumber and sleep. This ain't no time to rest and relax. The world is calling. We Omega men must answer. We've got to keep our eyes on the prize, our shoulder to the wheel, our feet on the ground, our nose to the grindstone, our finger on the pulse, and the pedal to the metal. Because we got to keep moving forward because the world needs us. No organization is better equipped, better positioned, or better prepared to do what Omega men are in position to do. We've got the ability to fill the gap of leadership. We've got the capacity to supply the manpower to make sure that the world is satisfied. Remember who we are and remember what we do. We answer when the world calls. As I wind down, let us forever hold near and dear the vision that 3 Howard University juniors, Edgar Amos Love, Oscar James Cooper, and Frank Coleman, along with their faculty advisor, Dr. Ernest Everett Just, shared as they founded Omega Psi Phi fraternity in Washington, D.C. on November 17, 1911, on the campus of Howard University in Thurkill Hall. They saw an opportunity, those 4 visionary men, to create a movement for which the world called. The world identified a void, needed somebody to fill it, and Love, Cooper, Coleman, and Just said, you know what? We'll fill that void. The world is calling. We're going to be the original Omega men to answer the call of the world. The founders demonstrated by being the first Omega men to show up and thereafter to show out when the world was calling that it takes manhood, it takes scholarship, it takes perseverance, it takes uplift to do what's necessary to answer the world's call. Since then, over all these years, decades even, when the world is called, Omega men have answered. When the world called for an international program to recognize and encourage positive accomplishments, Omega men answered with this Achievement Week program. When the world called for an international platform to provide an opportunity for young people to showcase their talents in the performing arts, Omega men answered with the Talent Hunt program. When the world called for financial assistance to help aspiring and promising students such as these young Omega scholars about initiatives to improve the quality of life and the betterment of their opportunities for education, we had Omega men answer with a scholarship program. When the world called for opportunities for people to have their quality of life uplifted and to have opportunities for the betterment of all people, Omega men answered with the social action programs. When the world called for political and community awareness to be promoted for the attainment of societal advancement, Omega men answered with political action programs. When the world called for input and activity in the education and practice of good health, Omega men answered with the Health Initiatives program. When the world called for trailblazers and standard raisers in all of the conceivable fields that you can imagine, academics, athletics, entertainment, business, religion, civil rights, politics, education, government, science, medicine, and law, Omega men answered by raising the standards to give all a standard by which to be measured and by which to as well emulate in terms of making sure that they can obtain greater accomplishments in those various arenas. And when the world called for helpers and workers and providers and builders and those of all sorts, of all kinds of endeavors, all types of situations, day and night, 365, 24/7. Omega men were there to answer. At this Achievement Week event this evening, therefore, I want to challenge my brothers and challenge all of us, because we're all in this thing together. Let's not look at this evening's program as being just a celebration or a commemoration, Let's look at this as a rededication. Let's rededicate ourselves to renew, revive, refresh, recommit, and reestablish those principles by which we know as Omega men, and all of us, whatever name you call it by, that we need to remember that when the world calls, Omega men answer. And indeed, let's spread that out to everybody answering the call. When the world calls, we won't act like we're not home. When the world calls, we won't act like we didn't hear it. When the world calls, we won't act like the phone was disconnected. When the phone rings, we won't act like it's a collect call that ain't worth it. When the world calls, we got to answer. When the church calls, we got to answer. When law enforcement calls, we got to answer. When our panhandling sisters and brothers call, we got to answer. When the community calls, we got to answer. When Rocky Mount calls, we got to answer. When Edgecombe County calls, we got to answer. When Nash County calls, we got to answer. The state of North Carolina calls, we got to answer. When this great country calls, we got to answer. Who's going to be in the forefront? When they all call us Omega men. Because when Omega men are called, the world is making sure that they know who's coming to the plate to come to bat. So remember, when the world calls, Omega men answer. That's what we've always done. That's what we do today. And that's what we'll always do, my brothers. Thank you for having me. God bless all of you.